Welcome to our ND Community Podcast. I'm Catherine and I'm a mother to 3 autistic ADHD daughters.
My name is Lorna and I'm a mother to an autistic son. We are going to be exploring stories and resources around lived ND experiences here in Guernsey.
On this podcast, we're talking to Tory. Tory has recently had a book published called The Magic of Not Fitting In. The book looks at their family's experience raising their autistic child through the Guernsey education system. Okay, Tory, welcome. It's really good to have you to chat with us today. One of the reasons we wanted to chat with you is I recently read an alarming statistic that 92.1% of children and young people who are experiencing school distress were described as neurodivergent, and 83.4% of them were autistic. That was reported in the Frontiers of Psychiatry last September. And you've recently had a book published about your experiences and the experiences of your family with school distress called The Magic of Not Fitting In. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
And so it'd be great to talk to you about your experiences around that.
Yeah, I'd love to know, Tory. So what kind of prompted you to write the book? What made you think, right, today I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write down my experiences? What kind of brought you to that point?
I was having a series of conversations with parents hiding behind or really struggling to get the full story out of exactly what had happened to them. And it echoed our story. And I thought, this is actually hiding. It's hiding in an awful lot of shame. It's hiding in embarrassment. It's hiding in what should be plain sight. This is not okay to drive a family to a level of trauma that needs, some serious support afterwards, some, major life changes and serious support. So that's when I decided to get the courage up. I started writing a blog, and I was working with a lady who looked at it, who is an editor, and she said, it's not a blog, it's a book. And bless her heart, she said, can I help you get this out? And so I had a lot of help, a lot of support to actually get the full story out. And it was very triggering to write, but very healing as well. At the same time, you're still working through the things that are coming up, and they're vast. They were huge. So that's what prompted me to write.
Yeah, I think that you do cover really kind of big themes in your book. There's lots of things that I think people who maybe don't have neurodivergent experience, whether that's in their family or, generally, I think they'd be quite shocked to actually see how much of a carer's life it kind of permeates.
I know how shocking it was for me to actually have that experience. I had a neurotypical experience up until my son was diagnosed. And when he was diagnosed, I remember the incredible distress I felt. And meeting people that felt that it was a GP appointment, that a GP had suggested my child was autistic, and therefore, I'd literally just gone and had a 10-minute, 15-minute appointment with the GP. Yeah. And it was like, take this paracetamol, off you go. It's like, no, it's really, this is about how he receives the world. I understood that. And I understood that it was fundamentally different and how much we were struggling. The idea that there was no end to that was quite terrifying for me initially. I thought, how do I support him? This is quite overwhelming stuff, when it comes in. Yeah. Go through that diagnostic process, for anybody who doesn't know, it's months in the first instance. It's not a 10-minute
If you're lucky,
appointment.
It's months. I think we've had experiences of it being years for some people.
Years, exactly that. Well, once they're picked up, like you say, it's an elongated process of observation in a number of places. So meeting that, I suddenly understood how much I really didn't know beforehand. Now I was being forced into knowing, and just how overwhelming that actually was, because the school distress statistic that you referenced really doesn't cut to the fact that, look, we're hearing about it now because it's affecting the education environment, but this has been affecting autistic families experiencing autism for a significant period of time, yet again not spoken to. That distress translates into it permeates every aspect of your life. as you had it. It's gone.
It's not just school distress for the child,
Yes,
it's for the family.
incredible family distress at that point as well. And there is not only is there not enough, nowhere near knowledgeable enough support in the school environment, there is nothing outside of the charities. Bless their hearts, because I think we'd have fallen apart without National Autistic Society and Autism Guernsey. We would have fallen apart. The pressure of that was phenomenal, and there's nothing beyond that for families. Nothing in the workplace, nothing. The school are still completely okay to just pick up the phone and give you a yell and say, "Come and get your child. You understand you're the mother. You are responsible for this child." And you think, "Hang on a minute. I have a career. How do I balance this? How do I make this work?" It's an impossible situation at the moment. If things continue the way they are, it's just breaking people left, right, and centre. And your mental health crisis statistics probably bear out the child distress statistics that you're seeing at the moment. So we can look forward to more of this in the future if we don't get on it.
Yeah.
And do you think, so when I read your book, so one of the first things that kind of, I'm just going to say this because I found it a very difficult read. So I picked your book up and I started reading it and I had to put it away for a few days. And then I had to come back to it because there are some things that are quite triggering. And as you said, it kind of permeates your whole kind of life, your belief system even, if you want to go that far. One of the things that you mentioned that I thought was that kind of hit home to me early on is when you were kind of setting the scene. So you were saying about your experience and how you grew up and your parents and how school was always, it's the foundation for everything. It's the foundation of how we live our lives, basically. If you do well at school, if you turn up every day, if you get good grades, good attendance, if you're all around, good pupil, then you're kind of set up for life. That's kind of the first step, the rung on the ladder. But for our children, that's not easy. That's a really tricky time. I think that's when most parents will say they actually start to struggle with their children is when they kind of hit the education system. Is that true? Is that fair to say in your experience?
I would say that is completely fair. I'd never questioned the model that we lived in. I'd never needed to. I'd never questioned it.
Because your first son had kind of gone through, hadn't he? He'd gone through school and he was a really high achiever and he just sailed through. Easy child, you said.
Absolutely. He kind of raised himself. I feel like a bit of a fraud sat behind there. It was very easy to sort of steer, guide, he asked questions, I provided guidance and answers. I think that's the fairly typical parenting that many of us have been used to or kind of expect. So you've also got this whole parent grieving process when you also have a child that doesn't meet that, in inverted commas, expectation, and I over the last few years I'm learning that expectation is an absolutely crippling thing and I need to let go of an awful lot of that. But it's the reason I started the book that way was that I had to go to support me. I went right the way back to these are the values I learnt. Do they still serve me? Are they serving my child? There is something fundamentally different, not only between my time at school, which also, you can read about. It was, it wasn't plain sailing. My eldest son's time in school, also having those moments of serious wobble, and then for our youngest son, his absolute. Oh, yes, I admire him so much. I admire him so much for showing. Yeah, I think a massive hat off to William, who just showed us the way.
Yeah, they teach us a lot, right?
Yeah.
Oh, much.
You mentioned you felt a huge amount of shame. Tell us a bit about why you felt shame.
So I think there's various points where, as a parent, we're really kind of judged. I mean, I think we're judged quite harshly throughout life, anyhow, and we're pretty unkind to each other as a species. It really does come up short when you're a mother and you're pregnant and you're going through that system of what you should eat and what you should drink and what you should do and all the things you should. There's a big should word that comes in here, which is an expectation again, isn't it? when he's born, he's beautiful, and we're all so, oh, well done, mummy, what a gorgeous child, and how fabulous, and haven't you done well, and he's the right weight, and he's right this, and he's right that, and then somebody starts questioning this. But the first thing they question is you.
Yeah.
What did you do, mum? And you rack your brains for what did I do? What did I, how did this happen? Hang on. And you kind of get stuck in that, I've done something wrong. And then the system as it is at the moment goes on to repeat those impactful things for mum. Even my husband, fantastic support to me throughout this, said, I don't think I cope with the level of scrutiny you are getting, but I'm really noticing it's not happening to me. Why is that? Why is it happening to you? Why are you getting the phone call
Yeah.
when I'm part-time to receive him? Sorry if I've just triggered you again. I'm sorry.
No.
It's another mum thing, of all the responsibility. So I started to feel shame that I'd failed him in some way before he was even born. And then the school system really, really fed into that. Oh, he's not going to be able to manage. Reinforced it massively and amplified it beyond levels, because they were able to point out exactly what he couldn't do because I hadn't done something right. And, that if he reads to him, I'm thinking, there's huge assumptions going through this system that are really unkind. You feel like you're constantly defending yourself. You're constantly defending how hard you're working with your child, because there seems to be this expectation in the education system that you're not doing anything.
I was going to say, and maybe that's the disconnect, or one of the disconnects is actually it seemed to always stop at your door and you're not doing enough. However, we know at home we are doing everything we can, and actually, it's distressing for us as well as our children.
It's like the education system forgot the fundamental rule that behaviour in children is communication.
Yeah.
It's just communication. And when our children, particularly with neurodivergence, are communicating distress, that really is telling you that this environment is not helping me. But we don't seem to have a system that is able to receive that information. It's mired in parent blame, which is crippling. It is crippling for you to work through as a parent, to understand that your intuition here, this matters. This is really important. And your child's outcry that really tugs on your parenting is a very valid point. They absolutely have a right to be safe, heard, believed, understood. They absolutely have a right to these things. And if we've got an entire system saying, no, actually, you just don't count. No, it's not.
Actually, and they also have a right to an education. And if that education is inaccessible, I would suggest that any child with school distress, if you're push them, get them into school, they're not actually in a physiological place to be able to learn anyway, because all their system is so heightened.
In a balanced way, there are some high achieving naturally academic children that are absolutely thriving in this system. You know what? Hat off to them. They should be there and they should be allowed to achieve in the way that they achieve. But to suggest that that is the way that everybody achieves is where we fail. It's where the system fails, is not everybody achieves in the same way. Not everybody has the same markers for success. Not everybody is looking to... William's marker for success was, could I just find the happy? Oh my gosh, my heart. It's like, let's find the happy.
Yeah. And there will be very academic kids that love all the learning, but still can't access it because of too many people, the bells, the lights,
Because William was in, so how long ago was it that William was in school? And he was in mainstream school here in Guernsey.
Yeah, he was, when, as part of his assessment process, which I think is true for a number of children now, there has to be a learning difficulty as well for them to have all this additional support.
Correct.
William was found no learning difficulty, ergo he would go to mainstream school, but he would have support. But the barrier to learning then was the way he receives the world. And there's not enough accommodation for that. So if you think from his perspective, every time he couldn't achieve, and so he was there between the ages of 4 and 9, 8.5, 9. So we were toying with the idea of home education and couldn't work out how to get that to work. Then my brain just was on you have to go to school because I have to go to work. I have to earn money to put the roof overhead and feed you.
Yeah.
But William in school was, we certainly gave it a really good go. He gave it everything he could, and every time he was removed, he felt like he failed. That there was shame. Every time he couldn't manage, every time there was a phone call home, every time. And then he learned another little way, which I thought was brilliant, but it's not going to align with the school's values, which is, you know what, this is hard and this is challenging me, but if I tell them I've got a tummy ache, I can just get out of this. So we had about 6 months. I thought, that's very clever, sweetheart. That's very, very good. No. If I tell my teachers that I've got a tummy ache and then I just don't have to eat my lunch for a little bit and then I get to go home. And I thought, that's brilliant.
But isn't it incredible that they find those coping mechanisms? They find them because they are not listened to otherwise. If they actually say how they really feel, that's disregarded. But if you say something that's acceptable from a societal point of view, like, oh, I'm in pain in my stomach, and you can name it and you can say, then that's acceptable. We can we can believe that. We'll take that on board. But if you say I'm really struggling because there's lots of noise, there's lots of people, and it makes me feel itchy, or it makes me feel whatever, how they try to label their feelings, that's just disregarded.
It's why we get to the point that kids then go, actually, I can't go to school. And it is a can't, not a won't. Yeah. But actually they vote with their feet because we haven't listened to them up to that point.
Yeah. William said exactly the same as, I cannot sit on the carpet for carpet time. I cannot. There's such, like you say, these children understand the difference between can't and won't. They really do. And I cannot. It hurts me. But he can't describe any more than that. And so exactly as you say, Lorna, Catherine, it's just dismissed as they all sit on the carpet at carpet time. And I think it's lovely. Your world is lovely, but it's not including a child. And to blame the child leaves a mark every time.
Totally.
Blame the child, it leaves a mark. We had to come away because the marks were starting to get too much. They weren't working through, they were building up. And in that build up, the distress was just, I just looked and thought, in every way a child should be flourishing, should feel okay. If you were oblivious to all of this, it wouldn't matter. But you're not, and you're feeling it, and it's absolutely taking away who you are. You feel it's not okay to be you, and that's not what I want for you. I want you to be you. I want you to be able to not hide the stim if you need it, or the key thing because you've been told to sit still in your chair. It's crippling as a parent to watch that, and that's when I knew we had to try something different.
Because we do find that particularly in girls at school, there's a lot of masking. So they will mask their way through school. They will kind of park how they feel. They won't say how they're feeling necessarily, and it becomes, when they leave school, they either go through burnout, or it will be a case that they become these people pleasers who don't really know how they feel anymore. They can't really identify what's going on inside them. So if someone tells them, oh, you feel like that, or you're this, or you're that, they will just assume that and take it on, because their needs and their pleas for help has kind of been pushed aside all the time, like it wasn't important, it wasn't relevant.
Yeah, or indeed, actually, the way they communicated wasn't picked up, because certainly our experience would suggest that the girls wouldn't know how to verbalise what they're feeling. So the things that I would pick up on, I would know when they weren't okay, but I knew them inside and out, right? Any teacher or anybody coming across them wouldn't necessarily understand what they were communicating. So there's a disconnect between the two communications, what they needed to be able to communicate at school and what they were able to communicate, because they didn't have the language to identify how they were feeling, and then be able to verbalise it.
I think I mentioned in the book, there was a brilliant moment. We had a brilliant moment in school, because I do believe there are teachers that are desperately trying to work this problem. I do believe that there are people that are desperately trying to get the resources they need to be able to deliver what our children need. The bit they're missing is the fact that inclusion is their voice of whether they want to be included. They need to be, do you want to be included in this way? Or is this way better for you? That's the bit that's unkind, is that there's no voice for them there. But the brilliance was this decider skills course that the headmistress, after quite a lot of trauma with the school, had really changed, and I was incredibly grateful to her. It takes a lot to hear what she had to hear about that system, and then to start working through it the way she did. I was very grateful. And when we sat with her and she talked through these decider skill courses, she said, I think you're right, we need the same kind of language. Now, I've been talking to the school for years, to different teachers, saying, could we use the same language with him that we're using at home? Or tell me what language you're using so I can use the same language at home, because it's intensely confusing to him. I have to put a sign up in 2 different bathrooms in my house to remind him to wash the hand, because it's only in one bathroom and not in the other, so he doesn't translate the skill. It's one of those things. So we're doing all of this. The decider skills course gave us the same language to use, but distressingly, she said it had been brought in as an ad hoc thing. It was an after school thing that a few parents and a few kids were attending, and it was brilliant. It talked about their fizz on a scale of, like, with a Coke bottle they could relate to. You can visually show William, when you feel this, it was wonderful. Really good course. And I said, that needs to be part of your curriculum. She said, I've just had a report about the amount of children in this junior school setting, they're tiny, that have diagnosable mental health conditions at this stage. I thought, we cannot just say parents. If we're going to say parents, let's have a little look at what parents are coping with, which is they came through this school system, they're a product of this school system, they've gone into workplace with this idea of success and everything else, they've achieved, and now they're being told, oh, no, you can't do that because you're a child. Come get them. You can't hold a high pressure job and be here. I can't, I'm good, but I can't be in 2 places at once. I'd love to be, but you're telling me he has to go to school. And this is the bit at the moment. You're telling me he has to go to school, but you're not providing a place where he can be. You're telling me I have to send him. And at no point, other than when I spoke to the charities, did anybody say to me, he doesn't have to. And that's when it started to shift. I was like, actually, let me think about this. There's a lot of responsibility. How do I do this? How do I do this? And it took months of, feeling, thinking.
Well, it's challenging all your core values, wasn't it? The things that you've been brought up with.
And society in general, this is what we do. We do this, and if you kind of comply and conform, then you are a good citizen, you're a good person. You send your child to school, they attend regularly, you go off and you earn and you pay your tax and you feed into the system, and everyone just keeps ticking along. Yes. That's how it works. That's how it goes, And if you step outside the matrix, it becomes a little bit unbalancing, and we all feel a bit unsteady about that.
Yeah, you'll see in the book, that's the trigger point. It's when we suggested to the system that we might leave. That was the trigger point for major trauma. And it really does encourage you not to do that.
What trauma was that?
So that, there was suddenly this complete change of tone. The meetings went from being about the ECHP and where it was meeting William to, actually, we're going to park his diagnosis. And, based on this recent nothing disclosure, we are going to suggest that he's being abused in the home.
Wow. And parking a diagnosis?
Firstly, that was the key point of, the training of, when you're giving evidence, a medical professional gives medical evidence, not a teacher. With the greatest respect to teachers, they don't give expert medical evidence. So for a teacher to suggest that they're parking a diagnosis, I mean, it's a teacher going up against medical professionals. And again, teachers are behaving like this is a 10-minute appointment with your GP and not an ongoing assessment period that has also been quite stressful for you and the child. So the fact that happened, that we were suddenly taking a teacher's view about medical evidence and not questioning that bothered me. That really bothered me. And that was what spoke to the policing. So I would never take a teacher to court and say, please give me expert medical evidence on autism. I might ask them what their lived experience is, but that is, very narrow and confined. And even if you're the trained autism teacher, it means you've had some training in autism, but that doesn't mean every autistic child has ever come into your field. And the amount of times we heard, autism doesn't look like that. And I think, you're my support network. Most importantly, you're his support network.
Yeah.
Tell him he doesn't look like he should.
You've got a police service background, and specifically later on in your career in investigation, is that right?
Specifically, it's all investigation from the beginning. That's frontline, going out into the community, finding out what the issues are. It's hard to be seen as a professional person sometimes in an educational environment, because I find that they still talk to me like mum, as an unqualified individual with not an awful lot to offer. And I guess that started the realisation that actually I am a professional person. I ask some really difficult questions a lot of the time. So why am I shying away from asking difficult questions now?
Yeah.
Because I'm emotionally involved. So if I can find a way of helping that layer a little bit, maybe I can start asking the questions that really matter, and noticing the slant in the documentation that was being presented to us really gave it a skewed interpretation of what had happened. And it's something in policing we desperately avoid. An investigator reports, this is what happened. There's ways that we're trained to do that. And I'm looking at it saying, are you aware that this isn't... And it reminded me that they're teachers, they're not investigators. There may be teachers that have some really great skills around this, but they've not necessarily been trained to investigate something. And when they're writing reports, there's a lot of personal opinion in there that's really quite unpleasant at times. And I mean, the reports that you don't see that we achieved later, they were really very concerning. There's a lot of stuff from gossip. But there is a professional path for teachers to take if they really feel incredibly strongly about this, and that is to go back and ask for a referral back to the medical professional and ask them to revisit, not to turn around and say to the family, we're going to park it and we're going to put you under investigation for something you're never going to be able to prove you never did.
Do you think that was a tactic?
At the time, as I said, the horror, because you're triggering my background, because you're triggering the fact that I've seen what child abuse looks like, and you've triggered all of that in me at that particular point. You're suggesting this is happening to my child with no evidence whatsoever. It's terrifying that was allowed to happen.
Yeah.
And then put me in a position of proving something didn't happen. I can go to my GP and they're saying that's the wrong GP.
But they weren't only doing that, they were taking the support away from your child as well at the same time. So doubling up any stress that you were currently under. They've added on an accusation of abuse, and they've taken away the support that your child was getting at school. I mean, that is just,
like you say,
huge.
tactically,
It's huge.
Are they isolating you at that point where you are, you really feel you've got nowhere to go? And again, I'm so grateful for the training and the background that made me go, oh, you're never alone. You just need to go and find the people who know, and to bring in a representative from the charity, and to bring in a state's deputy, and to bring in these people and say, look at what's happening here. This is awful. and try and get some sense out of what had no sense. We're trying to make judgments, and I was just so disappointed with the way the police service had changed. The fact that the officer involved never thought to question that. And I thought, oh, you've been ticking boxes for years and you've forgotten to go, hang on a minute, fundamentally, that's not evidence. You can have your concerns, but this is the pathway. And they didn't direct them there. They allowed that to happen. So by ticking boxes and not...
They almost facilitated it.
I felt such a betrayal at that particular point, thinking I've been nothing but outstanding, exemplary officer. The reply is you get no special treatment because of what you used to do. I said, I wasn't asking for that. I was just asking for treatment. I was actually asking full service, and you failed us. You should have been looking at the evidence in front of you, not the people involved, the evidence in front of you. And the evidence in front of you is, I've got an autistic child and they don't want to recognise the autism. First point, it's not your place not to recognise that. So first, let's bottom that out, because none of us really understands how autism presents in various children. This family have actually been complaining, this child's been distressed for the last few years. They've been working this problem with you. Look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. And that didn't happen.
You say about complaints. I think it was actually your book that led me down sort of looking at the various statistics, and this is one you may have well read yourself, that 50% of allegations of fabricated and or induced illness were made after a parent carer had made a complaint against the relevant public body.
Absolutely.
That's massive.
That shocked me too. I've been part of that service, and I'm completely blind to this aspect, completely blind, because I didn't behave in that way. It wouldn't occur to me to behave in that way. I didn't witness it in any of the colleagues I worked with, and yet this has become prevalent. When has this happened? Because if I witnessed it, I'd have challenged it. I would have challenged it. I'm not known for being quiet, but at the same time, I'm looking at the complaints going up. I'm looking at the children trauma. I'm wondering when are we gonna listen?
Yeah.
The police side, the medical side of things, the teaching side. When are we gonna listen?
The stress and the distress for families in this situation, on top of the stress they're already experiencing, it will take years to process if they actually do. And the thing that surprised me was, it suggests that actually it's relatively common. If you look at the statistics behind how many kids are not having their needs met in any particular service body, and then the people who will challenge it, and then 50% face these accusations.
As we travelled to Home Educate, that was the story that just kept finding us. It was that story that kept finding us. It kept repeating in other people who found a connection and then would please don't say anything to anybody, and out would come this huge, awful experience they've been through. And I remember we're camping, we're in our motorhome, my husband and I are up, and he's saying to me, we're not alone in this. I thought it was an anomaly, but the more I hear, the more I think we're not alone. And I thought, if it was just us, I could go away, lick my own wounds, think that's terrible, all the things we do when we think it's just us. But understanding that it wasn't meant I needed to do something else. I can't serve my community, which is what I signed up to do. I can't serve my community if I don't speak to this fundamental problem. This is huge. And I don't know when it started, but I do know it's global. So the beauty of the choice that we made, the gift that came with it, was the ability to travel. And I have contacts and friends now across the world talking about the same problem. And you almost wonder if people got into a room and agreed that this would be a course of action at some point. Now, that sounds ridiculous to me. That sounds utterly ridiculous. And yet that has happened. That the same problem, the same story of parent blame get your child into school, get this, get that, get that, drag them in their pajamas if necessary. In any other point of child protection law, you'd be looking at abuse. So the things that education is suggesting to families to do just to get their child into school when the child is in trauma would be considered abusive in any other aspect.
Yeah.
I just find that we haven't looked at that. We haven't looked at the fact that it's presenting as trauma. It looks like trauma. I mean, if it's a duck, it's probably a duck, yeah?
I can't help but think it goes back to school being like the whole foundation that we build our belief systems on, that we build our kind of society on. I can't, in my head, I just feel stuck at that point. I feel like if society thought that we should start dismantling school and the education system, I feel like they probably think it's like a deck of cards. And once we take away that layer, everything else will fall. So it's probably really scary and big. But, you know, if we're getting it fundamentally wrong with education and how we educate children with special education needs, whether that's neurodivergent or other, it feels like the whole, you know, everything that we've built our society on no longer serves its function.
But it's such a shame, isn't it, that you can't take that shift to the original spirit of this was that, and it's the great thing about law and studying law, sometimes you can go back to the original spirit, the original intention behind something. The original spirit and intention was good at the time that it had it. It was to give people opportunity.
Is it more about compliance and how we fit into the system rather than understanding and knowing and learning and just enjoying, you know, the whole beauty of learning and finding out, you know, because I love learning and I loved school. But I'm kind of, from my son's perspective, I'm looking at it differently now and hearing other people's stories. It's like maybe school has stopped being about the knowledge and the learning and finding a passion. And it's more about compliance, and this is how we do things, and this is how you will fit into a system in order for you to be successful and receive an education, go to university, and find a job, buy a property, get married, have kids, and just keep going and feeding into that system. Has it become more about compliance?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. It's a brilliant question. And I'm right with you. I think we're surrounded in the idea of what success looks like, and our systems all feed into that. You know, it's actually not successful to have this house. You need this one. You need this car. You need this. It's in your marketing. It's absolutely everywhere that you are never enough as you are, in the way you are, in the home you live in the way you do. You always need to be wanting more. So you've got not only education then bought into like a consumerism side of things that, you know, your child's excellent, but they could be better. You know, it's all right to have an A, but there's an A star at the end of that, you know, and you say, it's okay, they're a C and they're good here because, you know, maybe geography is not their subject right now. Maybe it will make more sense to them when they're driving or traveling or something like that. Maybe you've lost the humanity in how you teach math. And so you've got this disconnect with children because there is a fundamental difference between learning and understanding. And that is what education has lost with our children because they're not connecting, because they're not able to bring those bits together. I mean, this is for me. I'm only speaking for me here. These are my observations. And when you come back to your value and you think, actually, what really matters to me here is how happy he is. It excites me that there are teachers leaving. There are investigators leaving their own, and they're setting up alternatives, and those alternatives are starting to come in. And it worries me that that's where the UK government has currently gone for the whole, actually, we're not having this alternative thing, we're about to put some controls in here as well. And you think, but it's working for them.
What sort of alternatives are you reading about?
So, well, there's a number of them. I think it's because it's so varied. Our children are showing us ways over the last certainly few decades, and I think that parents have been listening for longer than that. some people are coming into the home and choosing to home educate because that's right for their child. Some people are finding like forest school initiatives or Steiner schools or other alternatives here, but we've got more progressive types of education, the Montessori models. There are models out there that are alternative. There's a group called Thrive Now looking at it's a former headmistress from a London school working with a chap called Aaron J, who's written an incredible book, Generation Hope, which goes through where I've gone back through education, my education to get to my values, to get to this in my book.
Yeah.
He's gone back through the beginning of economy and what that, and it's a brilliant read. I'm really enjoying it. I've not finished yet, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. But like you, I'm having to put it down, going, my goodness me, where did that come from? So they started a group called Thrive Now, and they're looking at the idea for autonomy and learning, which is like a human library. There's a Danish model of you can learn about other people by going and meeting them and talking to them.
Yeah.
This is like a library of learning where there are teachers that are passionate and innovative in their subjects who make their timetable available to children to come and explore. Now, when you're a child, I can see this suiting my child particularly well, and children who need some autonomy about, I want to look at photography, I want to look at the cosmos, I want to look at computing, I want to, and their interests are different to our rather staid curriculum, which is churning out things. I mean, it's 200 years old, our teaching method, and our industry has moved on massively, but we haven't moved on with it. So our children are now coming up with that voice to say, excuse me, I want to be in that direction. And they're showing us in just about every way they can that this is not, it's not interesting them, it's not holding them, it's not serving them. This is not, teachers are even when they're innovative, are sometimes being hampered. We're hearing these stories too about you can't teach that way because it doesn't cover the curriculum. And you think, well, they had these children engaged and they were learning, and just because it looked different doesn't mean it was bad. It was just, you can't measure it, and that's the problem, is education wants it measured. We've become such a metric place, and Aaron J talks about this so much in his book about measurement being the crippling factor here. If we've got to measure instead of rely on our own observation and just say, now hang on a minute, I've got a happy, healthy, content child who is learning because he wants to, and he's learning what he wants to. He's learning different skills, different things, and he makes the links when he's learning so that the understanding is core. And he understands that it's a shifting thing now, even if he doesn't always understand that the hand washing goes from that bathroom to that bathroom. He does understand that there are things that aren't quite so rigid. Having learnt unintentionally, potentially from our system, that it is rigid, it is rigid, it is rigid, it is rigid, that means I can't make a mistake. And if we can't make a mistake, it's the beginning of learning. I mean, we often don't reflect on the things that we've succeeded with, but we really do reflect on the things that didn't go well. And normally unkindly. So my child's doing this is really unkindly. He's a terrible person because he's made a mistake. I'm like, no, you had a learning experience. So you have to invent a whole new language around it. It's like there's a learning experience there. It's nothing more. It's just learning. And that, like you, it's a lifelong journey. It doesn't stop when you're 16. It's like, I thought it stopped when you're 16. No. No, the law says it does. You're right. It's written there that you don't have to go to school after that age. But believe you me, the learning will continue.
I also wanted to ask you about why you chose the path that you did. So you sold up, didn't you, and went on the road, and used that as a vehicle, literally, for home education. Tell us about the kind of thought process behind you and what led you to that decision.
So I really was asking in lots of circle groups and like parent groups, because there just was no help anywhere else. There was just a place that you could safely put it. And I started to ask questions that were just, just on the edge of clarity. I knew it needed to happen, but I couldn't work out how to get there. And not quite frustrating me, but driving me. You know, that frustration that actually pushes you forward a little bit. I literally had a wonderful sleep, woke up one morning, as it does, like a little bit of magic, isn't it? That I actually don't have to do any of this way. When I look at what resources and wealth and that we have, can I redistribute that in a way that actually serves us a lot better? At that point, I'm servicing a really high mortgage, and I'm barely making ends meet, and I'm in survival mode.
Yeah.
But it didn't take much to think, actually, there's an alternative. We had the motorhome, of the idea of like cheaper holidays. Maybe we could get away a bit more. Maybe it would help him because he's better outside. Maybe we could do more of that. And I suddenly thought, well, rent out the house, move into the motorhome. And why don't you make learning the adventure? Let's have that. And that's how Adventures in Learning came about.
And the Adventures in Learning is your Facebook page about your experiences home education?
It is, yeah. You can look at our journey through that. We've been quite transparent about it. The time away gave us a break from how we had always lived. And I can't quite believe that 3 people lived in such a small space for such a long period of time and got on so well. It was a breeze. It was an absolute breeze. But if you come back, if you look at it every day, it looks like when we're used to the measuring system we have. Has he read a book today? Has he done this today? Has he done that today? And you start listing. So you're unpicking that personal narrative the way through, going, you know what, he didn't read a book, but he went outside and, we were on a trail and he was reading all of that. So don't worry that the book, because he's reading about the trail, he's reading about the history of the place, and he's engaged with you and he was interested, so it was easy. There's an ease that comes with it that isn't about easy, it's just ease. He's at ease, and so the learning flows. It just naturally comes out. But I'm better if I assess that over like 3, 4, 6 month period and go, he's gone from there to there in that period of time. The whole point of that Facebook feed was for me to be able to go back and go, aha.
Do you think having that distance between you and Guernsey, where your collective trauma happened for the whole family, was also a help for your processing? And
without a shadow of a doubt, that was really useful to step away, to massively step away and say, actually, but like I say, it wasn't just Guernsey. This is happening in many, many places. But even I have very, very strong family values. And just to pull that in and say, actually, we're not bad people. We're not terrible parents. And he's a fabulous child. Let's see what happens when we trust ourselves. And let's see where this goes. Let's just see where this goes.
If you've got parents in a situation where they may not own property, they may be renting, they may not have assets to be able to play with, what small piece of advice can you get? What can they start tweaking in their lives to help them start to find some balance and some control? And
it's coming back to those values. It really is. It's what are you doing that it's not, your assets are not just the physical things around you, it's what you've got inside you. And that's what I learned. You find the way through. Some people are engaging in van life. There are people that are exchanging homes, but they've started with their values. There are innovative schools that are online now. So it just goes to that whole one size does not fit all.
Brilliant. Tory, it's been amazing. No, it's been amazing talking to you. So can you just remind us of the title of the book? And if people want to buy this or read it, how do they get access to it?
So we called it The Magic of Not Fitting In, because there is a little bit of magic that comes when you don't try to fit the paradigm, you don't try to fit the model, and it kind of releases you. So The Magic of Not Fitting In, and it's on Amazon, it's on It's on another platform as well that I can't remember off the top of my head, but it is on Amazon. I think everybody knows that. And you can have it as a Kindle or a hard copy. I'm looking into whether I can do it I've been asked to do it as an audiobook.
I believe I'm right in saying that the Guilole Library is also getting a copy.
Guilole Library copy, and I've asked if I could come and do a presentation as well.
Amazing.
Because I would love to do that, and it would be amazing to sort of reconnect with you both there as well. I think that would be
Love that.
fantastic.
awesome.
Love
So
that.
I'm just waiting for them to get back to me, and it would be super. But yeah.
Thank you so much. It's
Tory,
been incredible.
thank
Thank you.
Oh, thank you guys. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
If there are people out there who are listening and either have similar experience, or if there's any success stories as well, so please by all means get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Just a quick shout out to EasyDo. Without EasyDo, we wouldn't be able to do this podcast. They've lent us all their tech. We're really grateful.
Thank you.